Okay, hello everyone. I'm Deke James, the Hunter Engagement Coordinator with the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission. And I'm here tonight with our host partner, Guy of Judy and Guy Gardner of the New Hill Education and Mentoring Program of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. They've helped us with these webinars in the past and hope you enjoy introduction to deer hunting tonight. A little bit of webinar information. This webinar is 1 hour long. It is being recorded and it will be distributed in less than 2 weeks to all those that have registered. There will be a Q&A session right after the webinar, 30 minutes long. We ask you in writing only that you ask your questions and that they be topic specific, and they will be addressed at the Q&A, not during the webinar. Chat hand raising, I'm going to say, will not be monitored tonight. We usually have Master Officer Nathan Cox. He sometimes checks the hand raising in the chat. He won't be available. He's likely out in the field. So it'll be just the questions in writing. And please allow us to cover the material before writing any questions. A lot of times folks will start asking questions and we already answer them through the webinar. As I always say, that is our website is in green there, wildlife.org. That's where you can find pretty much anything. And obviously when you can't, you can reach out to us in customer service. And again, thank you for joining us tonight. There always is a justification for what we do as a state agency. We use science-based principles when we make decisions for wildlife, and it's the same thing with programming. And one of the things relative to my job as a hunter engagement coordinator is the fact that hunter numbers have been declining since between 1975 and 1980. And you can see some numbers there from 2016. We are on a precipitous decline. We're still waiting for the 2021 report. And this is a survey done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service every 5 years. That's a national survey. But I got into some state things tonight, state specific. So I will share with you that hunting license holders are somewhere typically between 600 and 700,000, but active participation of hunters is less than half of that and is currently at about 300,000 in the state. One of the biggest concerns within my realm is the fact that we as the baby boomer generation, or myself as the baby boomer generation, are aging out of hunting. And you can see here by the age of right around 63, we start dropping off. The reason that is a concern is that I like to say is the largest number of modern day North American hunters of all time, and we are aging out of it, and we are not replacing ourselves as we once did. Moving on, if we look at our entire NC population as a whole, it continues to grow, and many of you folks know that if you live in areas where there are new housing developments coming in. So when you look at those numbers and then look at the license holders at the very bottom of the screen and the active hunters, you can see we represent a really small proportion of the population. And I did a little math recently, and in 2021, of those 300,000 hunters, if you divide it by the 10.6 million total NC population, we represent about 2.9% of the population overall. Between 1975, that was between 8 and 10% of the population. And even in 2016, the most latest report from the Fish and Wildlife Service, we were down to probably 4 to 5% of the population. So our goal here is to at least to stabilize, and we don't want it to get to a point where, you know, hunters and their contributions towards conservation don't matter anymore. So that's one of the reasons why I have a job, and it's a primary reasons why we're doing these workshops. I'm primarily involved in the hunting webinar series, which you're attending tonight, and that is for all experience levels, whether novice or experienced. And obviously GSO hunting workshops that you may or may not have heard about. I know we've been putting some emails out regarding these workshops. They are very basic. In fact, sometimes you'll learn much more in the webinars because most hunters already know how to, say, shoot firearms or scout for deer or do game recovery and things like that, where the GSO is for a target audience that never hunted or has minimal experience and lacks the social support for hunting. So trying to reach those folks. Well, these are really experiments to offset participation decline. Whether or not they'll have an impact remains to be seen, but not unlike other states that are involved in similar programming. It's our goal to keep hunters active and engaged. Another reason for this programming. One of our primary limiting factors, or two of them, I should say, is volunteer support. Although we have Guy and Judy here tonight of the New Hill Mentoring Program, there are a bunch of groups that assist with GSO as well as them. And of course, Guy and Judy have their own program, and you'll find out in a moment. But that support is very limited, and that includes even post-event hunt mentors. And so for experienced hunters that are interested in getting involved, that is a huge, huge support factor that we could use. And also applicable venues for those GSO workshops, because they're done outdoors, they're done in person. And so there's a number of things that we need for that. So if you want to join the GSO team of volunteers, you don't need my email specifically, because that is my alias, gso@ncwildlife.org. So reach out. And that's including whether, if you qualify for the GSO workshop, I'd like to hear from you. And I can also send the rest of you folks, all of you, the remaining webinars that are coming up, and also the remaining GSO workshops. We also created this, again, relative to the amenities for GSO workshop, is reaching out to other hunters and landowners. And again, assisting with instruction, hosting event potentially on your property, or taking someone hunting following the event. We can only do this together, because if the agency tries to do it ourselves, we will definitely lose this battle by attrition, and we don't want to do that. CWD is on the scene right now. I have a few brief slides. This is a requirement, and it is for good reason. I'm going to try to make it quick. Obviously, we came here for the hunting specifically, but this knowledge is very important to you, and we hope that you do review it afterwards. I'm just going to hit the high points from our deer biologist. That is the website, but you'll also be getting a bunch of links after this webinar when I'm ready to distribute the recordings, and it'll have links to this information. So it is chronic wasting disease, referred to as CWD. It is neurological. It is spread by those factors: saliva, urine, feces. Infected deer may remain sick for a few years before dying, so they may not even show symptoms initially. Does become more common in the herd over time, because it's always fatal and eventually will cause population decline. And kind of thoughts are 30, 40 years out, we will notice a difference, which is another reason for paying attention to this information and reading more after this webinar, so we help to control, at least control its spread. As we said there, 16 to 24 months before a deer shows any symptoms, and you can see there in the picture of that deer, although sizable antlers, it is definitely looking very small. So as it says, extremely skinny, drooling, droopy head, no fear of humans, tremor, stumbling, excessive heat, thirst, and urination. So obviously deer can act strange on their own without being sick, but if you see these type of things, it's reason for alarm. And we do want you to reach out, whether on the website, find a district biologist, because that's usually a contact, or absolutely, if you have to, you could even reach out to me. But there is information on the website who to reach out to if you see a deer with symptoms. So obviously first detected in Yadkin County. You can see, looking at the map, that was the first area that now has both a primary and secondary surveillance area. And then down here in the Fayetteville area now, you can see the counties included, and of course, which one per color coded. And obviously, I'm not going to read all that text here, but those where it was currently happening. And obviously, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So now we are on top of this, so to speak. All these regulations apply to those special surveillance areas. There is a wildlife feeding ban. The baiting's legal during hunting season, but as you can see in the dark font, it's prohibited January 2nd to August 31st in those surveillance areas. Fawn rehabilitation is prohibited. Carcass is not transported out of those surveillance areas. We don't want it to be moved elsewhere, so don't give it a ride. You'll hear that again. Mandatory CWD testing during 2 weeks of gun. So if you harvest a gun in those, harvest a deer with a gun in those areas, you want it tested. Urine, glands, or excretions may not be collected off deer harvested here for hunting or scouting purposes. And for more information about that, see the regs page 55 for more on baiting and attractants, because there's definitely more information there. And we do as I do say with scouting or anything else, scouting for deer, let your fingers do the walking before you head to the field. So our goal is to fight this. Follow the regulations, submit samples of your deer, do not give it a ride, responsibly dispose of deer carcasses, don't move deer out of CWD surveillance areas, and there's much more information there. Again, we don't want to make this webinar tonight entirely about CWD, but we do want you to read the information just like you would do prior to scouting and going hunting and checking maps and things like that. And we thank you for your attention to this. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Guy, and he will begin with some information about his programming. And I will say this, these folks are volunteer folks. They're not a paid employee like me, and I'm always very humbled by my volunteers. Like I like to say, they make me work harder for what I do. And these folks have raised the bar incredibly, including having their own webinars, their own field days. Absolutely incredible how altruistic these folks, and again, many of my other volunteers are. So with that, Guy, please take it away.
All right, Dee. Thank you so much. And thank you for all those accolades. So tonight we're going to go over deer hunting as an introduction. I mean, I've been hunting for 50 years and I never stopped learning. So this is just an overview. It's no way by the end of this are you ready for hunting, but it gives you an idea of what's involved overall in the hunting process if you're brand new to it. Maybe if you've got some experience, it may even give you a few tips here and there as well. So we're, Deed, I don't have control. Sorry, just one moment. All right, so briefly, this is what we call the trifecta. Deed already mentioned the GSOs, and those are a one-day field exercise going through most aspects of hunting. Very, very valuable. Then we like to see the New Hill is slightly advanced, and we have like 4 to 5 sessions, full day sessions that we go over all aspects, but in more detail. And then we go on to Opportunity Outdoors, which is more hands-on. I mean, they mentor you, but then they bring you to an area, and then you might be on your own hunting, and then they'll give you some support at the end of the day or so. So it's a little less hand-holding on there. They also do fishing and other hunting besides deer.
Guy, just for the heck of it, click on the screen and then try it again. If not, I'll move the slide. There you go.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right. So this is something that was developed by New Hill in conjunction with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and Opportunity Outdoors. And these are webinars. There's 14 of them. You'll get you'll get all these slides so you can get access to these later on. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it covers so many aspects of hunting. These were created because of COVID, when our New Hill program could no longer meet face-to-face. So we went ahead and created these webinars, and they're for you to use at your will. And so also, when we do our New Hill program, we do require our new students to go through these. So this is our program, the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program. We focus on adults. If they've got children, what we want is the adults to learn to hunt, and then they can teach their own children. So it's taught by all volunteers. We're experienced hunters. We go through several sessions all on Saturdays, and then we actually, if we can, we take on a hunting trip at the end of during the hunting season. We're doing this year. This is a hands-on deer processing. There's going to be 2 locations. One's down at Peckman, and that's on November 25th. And the other one will be down here in Lillington, where Judy and I live, and that's December 2nd. So this will be a hands-on going through skinning and quartering, and then how to actually butcher a deer. And again, this is Opportunity Outdoors. There's their link. Go on to their website. They've got events going on. You can sign up for them. Great group of people there. And last, Hunters for the Hungry. We've been very involved with this. This is a way to give back to your community. If you love to hunt, you have your freezer full and you still want to hunt, you can donate deer. There's a list of processors. You can see that little map. It's hard to see it on there, but you can go to their website and there's a list of the processors that will accept deer, and then they will grind it up and then distribute it to local food pantries. Great organization. All right, so we're done with the commercials. We're going to get started here. So what I've done on this slide is I've broken down deer hunting into 3 steps. And number 1, you want a deer to be there when you're there. So this is all to do with scouting. You know what a deer track is, you know what deer droppings, you know what a rub and a scrape, which we'll talk about later. You know how to tell that a deer is in the area. So this is a first place. You wouldn't want to put your stand, or you wouldn't want to sit someplace where there's no deer. So you've done all that, and okay, there's a deer there. Now you don't want the deer to know you're there when you're sitting in your stand. And this involves learning, you know, all their senses. You got to defeat their senses. You got to get your camouflage. You got to be hidden, especially the wind. You got to know which way the wind's blowing. Everything to know that a deer won't know you're there while you're sitting there. And then finally, you've practiced, whether it's an archery or a rifle, and you can make a clean, ethical shot on that deer so that you can recover it. So we'll go over basically all these steps. We're not going to do shooting, but go over all these things you need to know to help you do those and accomplish that. So it'll be an ongoing learning thing. Like I said, I've hunted for more than 50 years and I learn something all the time. I spend a lot of time in the woods. I love to hike. I love to walk, scout. I'm scouting even though it's not hunting season. I want to learn. And so this is all part of what you need to develop, is this desire to learn about deer and whatever species it is. I know Deke is an avid turkey hunter. Turkey, there's a lot to learn about turkey as well. So we're going to start very simply here with some biology. A deer is an herbivore. Obviously, an herbivore is one that eats plants, but this is not a grazer like a cow. This is a browser. So they will walk and bite, walk and bite, walk and bite. They like to eat leaves and buds, fruits, nuts, things that they can get like that. They just do not graze on grass. I'm not saying they'll never eat grass, but they are not grazers and they do not eat grass regularly. They're ruminants, so they have a 4-chamber stomach, meaning they can eat their food fairly quickly. While they're feeding, they're very vulnerable to predators. They are prey animals. So this way they get to go back into the thick cover and then they can ruminate and chew their cud and finish their digestion in safety. Obviously live in diverse habitats. You've probably seen them in your neighborhood in most areas, and you can see them in pine thickets. You can see them in swamps. They live in desert areas. So very, very diverse, very adaptable to all kinds of situations. This is their body weights. This female's 80 to 160. Now we do a deer donation site, and we brought in 400 or 500 deer, I think, in the course of 5 or 6 years. We've never seen a doe 160 pounds. I think we had one 120 some. So I don't know, there may be a 160 pound doe, but anyway, it's in that range. Bucks 100 to 200. These are adult bucks. We've had them over 200 pounds. So they do get heavier than that. Lifespan, 7 to 10 years for a doe, possibly, and then 5 to 6 for bucks. Bucks go through a lot more with the breeding season, and they're targeted a little bit more often on hunting, so their lifespan is much less. Okay, breeding. So I mentioned this as part of hunting, mainly because this is the time when you'll hear, especially you talk to experienced hunters, this is the time they want to be in the woods. It's called the rut. That's the breeding period. And you can see the different times, whether it's in the eastern coastal plain or Piedmont or mountains. It changes, gets later in the year. And this all has to do with survival of the fawn. So if you live way up north, you don't want a fawn to be born in January. I mean, the chance of survival is very, very slim. So you want these to be bred later in the year so that the fawn is born during the peak of the green up of the spring. So that not only the fawn can have food, but the doe, which is nursing that fawn, requires lots of food. So it has to be prime food sources before, so these can survive. So this is why it's a little bit different. And you can kind of take that. I got a map here at the next slide to show you a little bit more detail when this is. So during the peak of the rut, the bucks tend to stay with doe, so they may not move quite so much. But prior to the rut and just after the rut, this is when the bucks are moving the most. They're looking for does, ones that want to be bred. So they're going to be moving more. They get more vulnerable. They lose some of their smarts and they do some pretty dumb things sometimes. So this is the time. This is why hunters want to be out there. Again, a lot of hunters target bucks. You know, they like those antlers. And so this is when the bucks are more vulnerable. So this is when the peak rut, I think this is on the website, on North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission website. So you can look at this, you'll get all these things. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but you can see they've got it down. And these are all based on some studies they've done on reproductive of the doe. Usually during the harvest, they can measure the fetuses and tell when that doe was bred based on the size of the fetuses. Important to know what they eat. And you can see this list, and this is just a small list. I read somewhere where over the course of time, they found that there's 400 different species of plants that a white-tailed deer they've known to eat. So it's a huge, huge list. So what's key here is that you need to know what they're eating where you're hunting. I mean, if you don't have maples in your area, you know, obviously they're not going to be eating them. So this is a huge list. Some of them include trees, like we got the red maple. Now, a red maple, they're not going to eat the leaves off a red maple that's 40 feet tall. But if it's a young sapling or the tree's been cut down and it's growing back, you know, they will browse on that new growth that they can now reach. So obviously it has to be something they can reach. The ones that are in bold, the acorns, clover, greenbrier, honeysuckle, persimmon, privet, and wheat oats, these are the ones that you might run across in the fall during the hunting season. The number one is going to be acorns. And then, you know, once those start dropping, the deer leave a lot of the other food sources alone. Even if you're baiting, a lot of times they'll leave that alone and go to the acorns. So if you can find oak trees that are dropping acorns, more than likely you'll have deer coming into that. Clover is generally, this is clover over here, it's a white clover there. Generally, it's one that's somebody's planted. This is greenbrier. They really like greenbrier, but the problem is greenbrier, it's a vine. And once it gets up out of reach, it's no longer value to as far as deer go. So you got to find the ones that are brand new and just growing out of within reach of the deer. The very young growth on the end is what they really like. This is Japanese honeysuckle. It's considered an invasive, but it is an evergreen. And so when the other things are not available, they really will eat Japanese honeysuckle readily. And then privet, I don't have a picture of a persimmon, but persimmon is a fruit and it can hang on to a tree for quite a while. They're relatively small, orange colored fruit. Very, very sweet, but they will attract deer if they're dropping. The problem is with persimmon is that raccoons and possums also like them. So they'll climb up in the tree and take them before they get to drop. So a lot of times you don't see them on the ground. Chinese privet is another invasive, but it is an evergreen, not one of their preferred foods, but they will browse on it because it is evergreen. It's something that later on in late December and January, when the acorns are gone, they have not a whole lot else to feed on. They will feed on it. And then your wheat and oats, cover crops for farmers. This would be a great place for deer. They love that. So we had questions on home ranges. How far does a deer roam? And it's different for each deer, but in general, about 1 square mile is considered a kind of an average home range. A square mile is 640 acres, so that's a pretty good chunk of land to cover. So they do move over, you know, a pretty big area. So for you to hunt 640 acres, not that easy to do. But you can see these lines in these groupings of lines, kind of like a figure 8. This is a specific buck that was collared, so they know exactly where it was roaming. So that deer stays in there because it has everything it needs to survive. It has the food, the water, the shelter being cover, and then an acceptable amount of pressure, either from predators or from human predators. So it will stay in there. It's very hard to chase a deer out of its home ranges. You know, they really will stay in there. They'll just move to other areas if they feel pressured. You noticed on this one, if you can see that blue line, this is when the breeding season happens. So this is why they become more vulnerable. They go out of their normal home range where they feel very comfortable. So this is where you can, if you do set up trail cameras or you're hunting in your stand and all of a sudden you see a deer you've never seen before and the breeding season is going on, this is very likely why, because a deer has gone out of its normal home range and expanded it to look for does. So this is very interesting information, and there's a lot you can go on the web and read about collared deers and their home ranges. A little bit about their sexual maturity. They become sexual mature someplace around a year and a half. And then their maximum body growth is somewhere between 4 to 6, 7 years. And then their maximum antler growth, if you're interested in antlers, around 5 to 6 years old. Now you'll see, I like to throw in a few little things in here. If you're new to hunting and you're talking to other hunters, you'll hear these kind of things. And one of the things you'll hear about is, oh, I saw it was a nice 1.5 years or a nice 4.5-year-old deer. Well, why is it a half? It's because the deer were born in the spring. Most of this discussion happens during the hunting season, which is a half a year later. So they include that half a year onto the deer's age. So you'll see a lot of that 4.5, 5.5, 6.5 in the conversations you have. Another thing is yearling. We hear a lot of times somebody says, yeah, I saw a doe and it had its yearling with it. Well, a yearling is a deer that's 1 to 2 years, between 1 and 2 years old. It's not a fawn. Usually when they see a doe, and what they mean is that there was a fawn with it. So a fawn is younger than a year, whereas a yearling is between 1 and 2. These are just, again, terms you'll hear. Make sure you know what the terms mean. And antlers, you'll hear a lot about, the focus in a lot of hunting circles are antlers. When you first start out, you may not care about them. My wife, all she cares about is packages of meat. She doesn't care about antlers, can't eat them, but they are interesting and some of them are beautiful. So this does tend to be a topic of discussion when it comes to deer hunters. So bucks have antlers, they are not horns. And even experienced hunters sometimes say, oh yeah, that deer had a nice set of horns. They may know what it means, but I hope they know they're not truly horns, but you never know. They are antlers, they're made of minerals and protein. They're dropped every year. Generally, it starts in December. It just depends on the deer and sometimes it's health. And it can go all the way into January, February, March, where they're still dropping them. Antlers grow back very fast. In fact, they even used antler growth as a study for cancer because the cells are growing so fast. Number of points doesn't determine the age. So you can have a very young deer with 8 or 10 points, or a very old deer with 4 to 6 points. It just depends on the genetics of the deer in a lot of cases. This deer is in velvet. Velvet is the skin, hair. It's got hair on it. It's skin on the outside. This is what allows the minerals to be deposited. So once the rut gets close to the rut, it all has to do with the amount of daylight, the testosterone level increases, and this skin starts dropping off. And so the antlers will harden and they'll become more pointed and not so rounded. So that's the velvet. Another term you'll hear sometimes is, oh, I saw a deer with a boy, the G2 was 8 inches tall. So what is G1, G2, G3? What do they mean? Well, if you know, you can go on to the internet and look up Boone and Crockett, and they kind of develop this scoring of antlers and other things, not just antlers. But on the antlers, they have a form where you take the measurements, and all the score is measuring. You're measuring different aspects of these antlers in inches. Well, these tines, which I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these tines are these points that come upward off the main beam. On the form, they are in the G section of the form. And that's all it is. It has to do with this form. They're in the G section when they're measuring these points, these tines. And so G1, this is G1, this is G2, G3, G4. So just to let you know, so you'll know what that G means. All right, so okay, a deer's a deer's there, you know how to find a deer. We're going to talk a little bit more about scouting here in a little bit. But the other aspect of that is you don't want the deer to know you're there. And the way you do that is you have to defeat their senses. Very, very difficult. I've said before, they are prey animals. They're out there to survive. So they're looking for everything that's not normal. The number one defense they have is the sense of smell. You can look at the number of olfactory receptors, which is what picks up these scent molecules that are being given off by us and dogs and everything else out there that's alive. So they are very quick to pick up scent. So you probably will never actually defeat their sense of smell. I don't think there is a way. But what you can do in your hunting strategy, you have to know the wind directions at all times. And the way you can do this is you can there's a couple devices they make. One of them, I'm not marketing anything, but one's called a windicator. It's a little bottle that has a powder in it that you squeeze and the powder drifts up and you can watch which direction it goes. The other ones, they make these little fluffy things, or some people use milkweed seeds, but you can buy these little fluff things that you kind of release and then watch which way it drifts so that you know which way the wind is going at all times. If the wind is wrong and you've got a great trail, say, and the deer use that trail regularly, but the wind is blowing that direction from your stand, you may want to change stands, because once that deer picks up your scent, he may not use that trail for a while. So he or she. So very, very important to maybe have multiple stand sites available to you so that you can change if the wind is not right. So that kind of brings up a question we used to get a lot about, okay, if I have to go to the bathroom, what do I do? Do I go all the way back to my truck or all the way back to my home? The research shows that they are not any more afraid of your urine or feces than they are of any other animal. So probably best, in my opinion, the best thing to do is if you have to get down, go downwind, go to the bathroom, come back and get up your stand and hunt. You're better off hunting than you are going home. So obviously, don't drink 10 cups of coffee before you go. Try to get all your business done at home before you go out. So, and they do make containers. If you're worried about it, they do make containers for both men and women that you can collect this in. And you'll hear a lot of other hunters that don't agree with this. So that's just the way things are carried down from a lot of generations. Okay, hearing. Number 2 is probably hearing. Of course, you can control this. What's the hunting strategy? Don't make any noise. So noisy snack wrappers, the cellophane, that makes a lot of noise. Velcro. If you got your cell phone and it's got a Velcro attachment and it's making this, it's going to make some noise. Plastic drink bottles can make a lot of noise. But if you do make a noise, you hit your bow or your gun on the stand, you don't move, because what they're going to do is they're going to look for what made them move, what made that sound. If nothing's movement, they may just go back to what they're doing. If they're not totally alerted and they don't recognize you as anything, they'll probably go back to what they normally do. One other quick thing, silence your stand. Make sure that it doesn't squeak. These are all things you have to do in advance of the hunt. Make sure that thing doesn't squeak. The last one is vision. They have very good vision, especially night vision, but it's not an exceptional vision. They do not see blaze orange. We'll talk about orange. You've got to wear it during the rifle season. They do not see it like we do. So this is why it's so effective. It shows up real bright for us, but for them, they feel it's a muted gray or something. So the movement is don't move. Don't do the bug swatting and the hat adjusting, and eating and drinking is a lot of movement. So things you do have to move. Obviously, you're not going to sit there like a statue, but make sure you scan everything before you do these motion movements. Try to do slow and deliberate movements. And being comfortable up in the stand or on the stand will make it so you move less. So here's some communications. I mentioned the buck rubs. And this is part of the breeding cycle. So the bucks and actually should start rubbing fairly soon if they haven't already. Once that velvet is gone, they'll actually rub on some trees to remove the velvet, but then they actually start these rubs, and you can see it on this tree. They'll actually rub the bark off with their antlers, but it's more than a visual. It's also a scent marking because they have glands on their foreheads and around their eyes, and this scent is left on the tree after they rub it. So again, their sense of smell is so strong. This is very, very important. So deer are not territorial. So these are not territorial marks. They're just to say, okay, I'm in the area, especially when the doe come into heat and they're ready to breed. So mature bucks tend to rub earliest. They kind of like the pine, the conifer type trees better, but not all. And then some does don't get bred at the first major rut, so they can have other mini ruts coming in where other doe come into heat. And so you can see, sometimes you'll see rubs later on. So this is the scrape. This is the other thing you want to look for. And this is, again, part of the breeding cycle. And again, it's very scent oriented. So that what the deer does, the bucks will come in and they'll scrape the ground. You can see it over here where all the leaves are gone. Here's another example over here. All the leaves and vegetation are gone. And then they'll urinate in this. And especially the older bucks, they'll actually urinate down their back hind legs. And inside there is a gland. It's called the tarsal gland. This urine will run through that gland. It'll deposit urine and this glandular material into the scrape. And so now it becomes a scent marker there. And then they also have an overhanging branch on these rubs. You can't see it very well on this one over here, but there is a little branch over here. They will rub and lick on that. They call that common name is licking branch. They will leave scent and saliva and stuff on that branch. So that's all part of the whole process of a scrape. So some people get rubs and scrapes confused, but a rub is on a tree and a scrape is on the ground. And a lot of times you'll see people say, oh, that buck is rutting, you can smell him. And the reason you can smell them is this gland, this tarsal gland, gets so saturated with urine and the bacteria start growing on it that's a scent. It's a very strong, musty smell. Once you smell it, you'll never forget. Okay, so some of the communication they can vocalize. I'm not going to go through these things. You can go on the internet and look up white-tailed deer vocalizations, and you can listen to all of these things. So the fawn bleat is just a call the fawn makes to get the doe, so the doe knows where it is. Grunts are what generally people use for trying to call deer, the grunt call, and you can try those, but it's doe make this noise as well. And then there's a whole series of rutting sounds. The rattling, or where you get two antlers, or you can get this rattling bag and you bang them together, make it sound like two bucks fighting. The estrus bleat is a doe that's ready to breed, and then the tending grunt. So go online, look these up, and you can learn a lot. It's always worth trying some of these when you're up in your stand. You never know what might happen. So they do have body language. No, we'll talk about the foot stomp. You can see this deer has got its hoof raised. They will actually raise it and they'll jam it down into the ground. They're suspicious of something, probably trying to get whatever it is to move, trying to react so they can actually see it. Because again, they're looking for movement. The head bob is something you have to be well aware of when you have a deer in front of you and it's feeding. When you want to move, like if you want to bring up your gun or bow to take a shot, you got to be well aware that that deer will feed for a second or two and then pop its head up. Again, prey animals are looking for danger. It'll look around, and if it catches you moving, it might be gone. So then it'll put its head back down, feed. So it's just something to be aware of, the head bob. These deer in the middle are all alert. You can see their ears are up, they're looking, their eyes are straight ahead. even their tail is getting ready to possibly flag, like this one down here. Because once they run and they're totally alarmed, they will flag their tail. That's why they're called whitetail. So that's the flash or erect tail. It's warning other deer that something's not right. All right, so that's deer. And we're running low on time, so I got to hurry. So that's there's so much to know about deer. So, just try to learn everything you can. Okay, gear, and this could be a whole subject, a whole night subject in alone, is just gear. So there's a few things I would highly recommend. Your optics, if you're hunting with a firearm, buy the best optics you can, the scopes and binoculars. I love a good pair of binoculars. Try to spend the money on those. It's well worth having the good optics. Have a good flashlight. You need to, if you have to track blood, you need that. I wear a headlamp whenever it's dark, whether I'm going into my stand or coming out. I have a headlight on because my footsteps may alert some other hunter. I want them to know I'm not a deer. Deer don't have lights, so I want them to see me. But a good bright, a little small but bright light is good for tracking blood trails if you have to at night. Some kind of a good knife. You want to be an optimist. You want to say, I'm going to get a deer. I need to be able to field dress it. And then you need to carry some gear, so some kind of a little pack. And then whatever clothes, it doesn't have to be camo. Look back in the 40s when what they wore back there was plaid. They didn't wear camo. So it doesn't have to be camo. Best to have something that kind of blends in with their surroundings. But, I always tell people, go minimal first, find out what you like, and then buy that later when you know for sure what you want. Same with a firearm. You got choices out here. Buy one that fits you. Go to a shop or something because you can get ones with different lengths of pull, meaning the stock is different, so it fits you better. If you're a little bit shorter or smaller, you might want one that's got a smaller stock on it. So what action just depends whether you like bolt action. This is single shot. These are a little less expensive. And then you got the lever actions, which have been around for a long time. So firearms are something, boy, you could talk about that for forever. Whoops. Same with cartridges. This is just a minor few cartridges here, but these are some of the most popular deer cartridges. All I'm going to say here is the general rule. Again, this is general rule, and it's not, not 100%. You want 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. Here's the column with energies at the different distances at the point of impact for white-tailed deer. I mean, obviously, there's some that have less energy that will kill a deer, but this is just for ethical reasons, a rule of thumb, 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. So if you're going to shoot deer at shorter range, less than 200 yards, any of these will work. As you can see, the 30-30 is getting borderline at 200 yards. So anything under that's fine. 300 yards, a long shot, but if you have some of these soybean fields, you might go get these. You can see some of the cartridges that well over that 1,000 foot-pound. But one thing you want to keep in mind is recoil. So if a 300 Winchester Magnum has almost 26 foot-pounds of recoil, that can be quite a bit to somebody who's very sensitive to it. So you might not want to think about something like this if recoil is a problem. This is why you really best to shoot some of these guns, find out which one you can withstand the recoil. You can see like the 243, has significantly less recoil, and the 30-30 as well. So it's just something you have to shoot and find out what works for you. I like to say use the most powerful cartridge you can shoot accurately. I mean, there's a lot of lower caliber cartridges that are legal in the state, but I don't feel are deer cartridges, but you hear a lot of people using them. I like to have the most power, ethical kill is what you're looking for. There's other things besides centerfire rifles. You got your archery equipment. So you got your compound bow and your crossbows. These are both considered archery equipment in North Carolina. Some states, the crossbow is not considered that, so you have to know. These open up avenues that you don't get with firearms, either shotguns or rifles. There's a lot of places landowners might let you hunt with archery equipment, but they won't let you hunt with a firearm. There's also an urban archery season at the end of the year where you can hunt in certain areas with bow only. So these can be very valuable. The season opens early. In fact, it's open Saturday I think statewide. So it opens this coming Saturday. So you see it opens very early. It can be a little unpleasant being 90 some degrees when you're out there, but anyway, gives you the opportunity. The other ones are shotguns. These can be very valuable. Could be the single gun that you own is a shotgun, because you can hunt birds, dove season, which is open now, but quail, you can hunt rabbits, with shotguns. But then you can get these ones that have scopes, and you can buy some of these like this one here. It has a rifled barrel and then a smooth bore. So you can shoot shotgun slugs out of it for deer and bear. But then you can shoot the smooth bore for your bird. So very, very versatile gun. Do know that if you're shooting slugs, they do have a pretty hefty recoil. So again, and you probably want a sighting system, besides just the smooth bore. You want something like either a scope or some kind of iron sights that you can have a better chance of a good clean kill. Muzzleloader season, they do have a 2-week muzzleloader season here in North Carolina. It comes in right after the archery season. So this extends your range versus archery equipment, but it is a single shot. I enjoy muzzleloaders. It just takes some practice learning how to load them. Obviously, they're loaded in the muzzle. That's hence their name. But they're very effective weapons and can be a lot of fun. So how are you going to hunt this? Again, you'll develop your own systems. I think the most effective way to hunt deer is from elevated stands of some sort. It puts your scent up and away, it blows out and away generally, puts you above their line of sight. So it does give you some advantages. And so you can see here's the different types. This is a ladder stand. Here's a single. This one's a 2-person. You can get, have a buddy sitting with you. These are climbing stands. They are a 2-piece stand. There's a base down here and a seat here. And you just have to learn to use them. It's like an inchworm going up. You lift the base up, then you lift the seat part up, and then you lift the base and you move up the tree that way. This is a fixed position. Some people call them lock-ons. It's just strapped to the tree, and you'll have a climbing aid of some sort. This is a set of ladders that go up like this. And so that'll allow you to climb up there and use that stand. And these are tower stands. Obviously, they're not very portable, but they are very comfortable. And the advantage of this one, this is a tripod. Advantage of this, you don't need a tree. So if you got an area that's a cut over, but all the trees are real small, these tripods can be valuable. So the climber and this fixed position are the ones that are probably the most portable. So if you like to hunt way back in someplace where especially on public land, that's my recommendation, get back as far as you can, get away from the other hunters. These become very valuable. Safety is paramount with these things. I'm a hunter ed instructor as well. Most years, the #1 cause of fatalities in North Carolina are falling from tree stands, not being shot. So it's very, very important. They make the fall arrest systems now. This is the fall arrest vest he's got on. So you want to always wear that, and you'll be connected to the tree. This is rope. It's hard to see. It's called a lifeline. It has a prusik knot on it. And once you get your stand set up, you hook it up into the tree. And from then on, when you go up and down into your stand, you're always tied in. So if you were to slip off the stand, you don't fall to the ground. So it at least keeps you up there and allows you, hopefully saves your life. So you always want to maintain those 3 points of contact, your 2 feet and a hand or both hands and your foot as you're moving up the steps. But it takes a lot of practice, no matter what stand you buy, especially if it's a new to you, practice and practice all the time before you go out and set it up for an actual hunt. You want to feel safe. You want to know how you do it, how to do it. And you may be doing this in the dark if you go out there early morning on your early morning hunts. So I mentioned blaze orange, and the deer don't see this. These are the requirements. It allows other hunters to see you. And the requirements in North Carolina, some states have a certain square inch requirement, but North Carolina, it has to be visible from all sides. And it has to stay on you the entire time you're hunting. So don't get up in your stand and take it off. Some people do that. So just leave it on. And you can see while you're, once the deer season starts, whether you're hunting bear, boar, rabbit, squirrels, once that deer season opens, it includes muzzleloader, you got to wear blaze orange. So if you're hunting with archery during the pure archery season, from now until the opening of muzzleloader, you don't need to wear blaze orange. But if you're hunting with your bow during muzzleloader or rifle season, you still have to wear blaze orange. Very, very important to realize, just because you're hunting with a bow does, you know, if it's during the firearm season, you have to wear blaze orange. So this is just some points, you know, you can see it, people without it fade in pretty easily. It's hard to see this person, but that blaze orange, you know, even step back pretty far, it can save your life. Very, very important. All right, so you're ready to go now. So preparing for the hunt, it's important to know whether you're physically able to do this. I mean, you know, hunting can be strenuous or it can be less strenuous depending on what type of hunting you do. But if you're hunting in September during archery season and you shoot a deer and you got to drag it out and it's 90 degrees, you got to be in pretty good shape to drag a 100-pound deer through the woods when it's that hot. So know your conditions, know your limitations. So it's just very, very, very important. Prepare some kind of a hunt plan and let somebody know where you're going to be at all times. If you were to have an accident, you fall out of your stand, you need somebody to know where you are, because when you don't come back when you say you are, they're going to need to go look for you. And if they don't know where you are, that's a big woods out there sometimes, and they can't then try to find you. So if you tell somebody you're going to go to stand A, which most stands end up with a name or a designation somehow, and you get out to the woods and you find, well, A is not going to be right. The wind's wrong. I need to go to D. So now if you go to D without telling somebody and you don't come back, they don't know where to find you. So if you change your plan, try to notify somebody and let you know. So you don't need to give all this information, but it's important depending on who you tell, you know, let them know where you are and how they can find you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about scouting. So this is how you're going to know that there's deer there. There's certain things you want to start out with, and I recommend you looking at your aerial. You don't use topos quite so much anymore. With all the satellite views you got, you can really zoom in on some of these properties. And now you're not going to see where a deer is standing by any means, or where you can't see deer tracks. But the goal here is to narrow the area down, because you get some of these game lands that are 40,000 acres. That's a lot of land to cover. So what you want to do with these aerials is to narrow down where you want to search. Some of the areas you want to search, like these yellow pointers, these are narrow strips of woods in between, say, fields or maybe a pond or something else there. Deer don't like to be in the wide open, especially during the season when there's some pressure. They like to walk in the woods. So this kind of funnels, they call these funnels, they call them travel corridors. People have different names for them, but it's something that would funnel a deer. So you can see here's a field. So it's a little bit thicker here. Boy, this nice little narrow thing might be well worth checking out. Deer usually use those things to travel, so they're not out in the open. Here's another one, a little bit wider. Down to this bottom map, you can see there's several of them here. Little funnels like things that well worth trying to check out. Deer are creatures of edge, and edge is where two habitat types come together. So here you have woods and here you have a field. So this is an edge right along the edge there. They like that because it gets a lot of sun. There's a lot of food for them, but then there's cover real close. Make sure you know what the fall food sources are. We talked about those, what they are in the area you're going to hunt though. Look for your tracks and droppings. And I always like to say hard work pays off. Generally, the farther you get back in, get in there early, let the later hunters come walking in later and push the deer back into you. I'm always a fan of water access. We've got Harris Lake Park, we've got Jordan Lake, we've got Falls Lake. They've got hunting land all the way around them, or most of the way around them. If you have a boat, you can access those hunting properties from a boat. So you get in from the water. Now you're going to have to scout these out. You have to be able to find them in the dark usually if you go in the morning. Well, then hunters coming in with their trucks, they're going to park, they're going to be pushing these deer back towards you. So you're in there very early, get there before all the other hunters. All right, the other thing is you got to be able to spot a deer. And I know it sounds kind of how anyone can see a deer, but I've hunted with quite a few new hunters. You know, that's part of what our program is. We sit with these hunters and their brain is not trained to look at bits and pieces of deer or something irregular. If they see a deer, they want to see the whole deer. So you got to kind of train your brain, is what I like to call it, to look for anything different. Movement, some kind of movement, anything that's irregular. So this just takes practice. And I like to tell people to go to a park or someplace where there's deer. Don't watch these deer out in the middle of the field. Well, you can learn something from them out there, but watch them walk through the woods. And what do you see? You got to be able to look through these trees. Here's that deer right there. There's his tail, her tail. There's the belly. There's that thing, the body. So you've got to be able to look through and between these trees to pick up this little bit of irregularity. It might be a leg movement. It might be an ear twitching. It might be his tail twitching. It's going to be something that catches your eye, and you're going to say, okay, that's not normal. It might be a squirrel. It might be a bird. But I want you to be able to pick up a squirrel or bird, because that means you're seeing this irregularity back there. So it just takes practice. Look at birds and squirrels in the woods too. Look at the movement. You say, oh, I saw some movement. I wonder what that is. So once you start picking up that movement, then you're on your way. And you can see deer can hide right in the open. I mean, these deer is kind of hard to see. If you're not paying attention, that deer can be out there and gone. Just like this one, hard to see. Here's one, you know, there's 5 deer in here. These 3 here are fairly easy to see. This one, there's its head, a little bit hard to see there. This one's pretty hard to see. You can see it when you're on your own computer, but there is a deer right in there. You know, so you might not see that. If these deer weren't there, you may not know these other 2 deer are even there. So it just takes practice, practice, practice. Okay, so now you're in your stand, and I talked about this. The last one is you got to make that clean, ethical shot. So it's a matter of practicing. If you're using a compound bow, it takes a lot of many shots to feel comfortable where you can make that shot and make that ethical kill. Crossbow takes a little less time, pretty quick to learn to shoot. A firearm, you know, depends on how much skill you have. Firearm can take a while, but you want to shoot enough to feel comfortable and confident. But know your limits. If you're comfortable to 50 or 60 yards with your rifle, keep it at 50 or 60 yards. Don't go shooting one at 150. So this is the most common ethical, humane shot is what they call the heart lung. It's the chest. The best shot you can get is this broadside shot. Here's one down here. Here's where they recommend the crosshair. You got some flexibility in here. The idea is to go through the lungs. You will hit the heart once in a while. The heart is down low. You don't want to aim for the heart, because if you were to aim a little low, you'll hit the front legs and break legs, and it won't kill them. And that's very inhumane, and they may or may not survive, and it's not good. So you're better off aiming for the high productivity, you know, right there in this pretty much the center of the chest area. So this is broadside. What if it's a frontal shot? Don't recommend this generally with archery. Firearm, it can happen, but the problem is, even with an arrow, if it goes through, it doesn't hit bone. This will keep going. It'll go all the way through. A lot of times, a bullet will go through the chest, through the abdominal cavity, into the stomach and the intestines, and through the hind legs, and you've ruined a lot of meat. You know, and so, you know, I don't recommend this. Try to wait, you know, if a deer is standing and looking at you, but it's not too suspicious, wait till it turns broadside. This is called a quartering away because it's actually angling slightly away. The only difference is here, you got to move your shot just a little bit farther back because you want it to go through the lungs. I mean, if you aim at the same spot, it tends to go, just may only clip the front part of the lungs. One advantage of this is as you can see, their senses, their eyes, at least their eyes and ears, less likely to pick you up, especially with vision. They won't see your movement when you pull up your bow or gun. Whereas this one, they're going to be looking right at you. So if you have to bring up your gun, good luck. They more than likely see you. Say even if this one, these eyes, you can see their eyes on the broadside, they can see you from that vantage point. So once you take that shot, it's very important to follow through. Just like you follow through with a baseball or a football when you're throwing it, you want to follow through with your firearm. You pull the trigger, there's that recoil, the gun goes off, the bullet leaves the barrel. You want to stay down on that gun, looking through that scope until all that recoil and everything is done. You get used to doing that. You practice with that when you're shooting, because I've had people where they try to see what happened too quickly and they actually bring the gun down before they've actually shot, and they shoot low and either wound or miss. And so stay with that shot. I know you're going to be nervous. Everybody gets nervous. Even I know Dee and Judy and I, even we've seen a lot of deer out there, but your heart starts racing, you're nervous and you're excited. So you gotta kind of gather your thoughts. Okay, so you've made the shot. Important before you do anything, try to see where that deer ran but after you follow through with that shot. Sometimes you can't, especially like muzzleloader, there's going to be this big poof of smoke out there because it's black powder, huge plume of smoke. It blocks off a lot of things sometimes if there's no wind. So you may not see where that deer went. But you want to make sure you know where that deer was standing when you shot, because you're going to get down eventually and you want to try to find blood or bone or hair, something to tell you where you might have hit that deer. You're going to do a little CSI there at the site of where that deer was. So it's very important. Make sure you can recognize something when you're on the ground, because what you see up in your stand, if you're 15 foot up, when you get down on the ground, it may look different. Make sure it's something you can recognize when you're on the ground. So look for landmarks. If you saw where it ran into the woods and you're hunting the edge of a field, what tree, mark a tree, where did it go? So that's very important. So when you get down, you're going to look for the blood trail, because a majority of deer run after they're shot. Even when you make a perfect shot, they will run. They've got enough adrenaline, enough oxygen in their system, they will run. And sometimes it's a fairly decent length of time. So you want to let the deer have a chance to lay down and expire. So you don't want to go tracking it instantly. So after you've done all that, you want to slowly, you want to get down from your stand. So make sure you unload your gun, lower it down, get on down, and then kind of gather your thought, know where you're going to go. Make sure you bring your gun or your bow, because if it is still alive, you want to be able to finish it off. If it's in the evening, you want to bring your flashlight, something to mark blood trails. I always use toilet paper. You can use flagging tape. You can use other things if you want. But the good thing about toilet paper, I always try to pick everything up. But sometimes if you go too far tracking and you don't come back, toilet paper will biodegrade. And so you don't feel quite so bad about leaving it. But you try not to leave anything out there. You want to bring your knife. You're going to be optimistic on this, right? Bring your cell phone. If you're going to use the paper tags, make sure you bring those with you, and your license, because you're going to need to mark that deer. You're going to need to tag that deer when you find it. And once you get down, if you're hunting with a group, make sure you let them know that you might be wandering around. You don't want to get shot while you're looking for your deer. So with a firearm, you wait at least 30 minutes. You want to let that deer go and lay down and die. Archery, it's generally longer, up to an hour, sometimes even more. If you don't think you made a good shot on it, you want to leave it even longer. So if you know exactly where it was standing, you're going to look for some hair, bone, and or tissue. If you find white hair, that's not necessarily a great sign, because the only white hair is in the throat and the belly. So you might have shot low. So usually you'll find brown hair. You're looking for what kind of blood you find. Bright red blood makes sense. It's got a lot of oxygen in it. That means generally you hit a lung, and that's good. You can shoot a little bit farther back. The liver is right behind the lungs. that'd be a dark red shot. That's almost always fatal as far as I know. But a little bit slower death sometimes than the lung. One of the worst is the gut. You know, you hit in the stomach or the intestine. You might find stomach matter or intestinal material in the blood droppings or on your arrow. Doesn't mean it was strictly, you could, if it was angling away or angling towards you a little bit, it could go through the lungs and out through the abdominal cavity, and you may pick up some of that. So it doesn't always mean it's a pure gut shot. And so it still may be good. It just depends what else you're seeing. So blood trailing is really an art. I practice this every chance I get. When I'm out hunting, I shoot a deer and it runs over and I see it fall down, I'll wait. I'll go to where it was standing and I'll follow the blood trail, even though I know exactly where that deer is, because I want to learn something every single time. And you will. So the first thing is, don't walk on the blood trail. You want to preserve it. You don't want to ruin it, because you may have to come back to it. If you lose it, you may want to come back and retrace those blood drops again. So don't walk down the middle of it. Mark them, you know, we mark some of them with toilet paper. You know, that works out real well. So something to mark those spots so you can find them again. Because a lot of times this is going to be at night if you're hunting in the evenings. That white paper shows up with your flashlight fairly easy. You might find signs of a struggle where, you know, because the deer's wounded, it's not going to be acting quite normal. Come fall, when you got a bunch of red leaves on the ground, boy, I tell you, blood in red leaves, it's kind of hard to tell. Sometimes you have to actually pick up the leaf, you know, touch the drop with your finger and see if it looks like blood. Something we learned, and this is something I learned a couple of years ago. I mean, I know about hydrogen peroxide, but you can buy these little squirt bottles and you can spray that blood. And if it foams up, it is blood. If it doesn't foam up, it's probably not blood. So kind of a little trick there. So if you lose it, you just need to keep going back to that last marker and keep going ahead. It may have turned and you didn't realize it. So you just do everything you can to find this deer. So it happens to all of us. If you don't find it, you just got to do different things, make zigzags, do concentric circles, you know, trying to pick up some blood trail, get some help. They even have dogs now that are trained to look for blood trails. So you just do everything you possibly can to find this deer. Okay, so now you did find it. You want to approach it very cautiously. Watch the eyes, see if the eyes are blinking. If it's dead, the eyes will be glazed over because they haven't been blinking, so they get dry and they're kind of cloudy. I don't recommend touching them with your gun barrel, because if it is alive and it jumps up, now you've lost muzzle control. So, you know, make sure you use a stick or throw something at it if you're still not certain. And then if you have to finish it off, we recommend the heart and lung area if you can. The head is a kind of a small target, and it gets real messy and you ruin things. So shoot it in the heart and lungs, finish it off. They got the new system now, this Go Outdoors North Carolina. I would highly recommend you go in there and load the app, because if you got the app loaded, you can go online, you can go and tag your deer without having internet service. So it's well worth doing, very easy. You can go online and see how to do it. You can still print off your tags. These are what they look like now this year. And you can do 1-800-I-GOT-ONE. But remember, before you move that deer, you got to punch this. You got to punch the month and the day that you killed it. And then you can actually move it. The other thing you can do, you can find a wildlife service agent, you can go in there and have them check it in. So you must call it in and get your authorization number, which is what you write in this line, before you dismember the animal. Or if you're going to transfer it to somebody else for one reason or another, make sure you have all that information there. And you got till 12 noon the day following the day you killed it to do all this. So remember that. Read these on all the regulations and make sure you understand it. Very important to do. Field care is very, very important with the quality of the meat. The number one problem is heat. So you want to get this deer cooled down as quickly as you can. Gutting it, field dressing it is probably the quickest way to get as much of the body heat out. It also gets rid of excess blood. So you want to get it on ice or in a cooler of some sort, just as absolutely as soon as you can. Hopefully you're going to come Thursday night. We're going to talk a little bit more about field dressing, but basically what you're doing is you're making an incision from the anus all the way up to the chest cavity, and you're going to open it up. You're going to remove all the guts, and then you reach up into the chest cavity, cut the trachea and esophagus, and pull out the heart and lungs, and it's done. I know it sounds great, and it's just a matter of seeing it a couple times, and you'll get it down. So field dressing, you know, very, very good way to get that meat, that deer cooled down as soon as you possibly can. A little less to carry out. I mean, I think that's about 40% of the body weight of a deer, so it does substantially reduce the weight for you to carry or drag out, or however you're going to get it out. So just a little bit more detail. You're going to cut around the anus to free this, because you're going to pull the large intestine in through, and then you take your knife and you want to cut again up, and this shows you what you're going to see when you do that. And these are all going to be connected down up near the spine and the backbone, so you've got to cut those as you go and pull them out. And then there's a diaphragm here, which is up just in front of the back part of the chest cavity. You're going to have to cut that, and then you have to reach up and cut that trachea and esophagus in order to get the heart and lung. Very important, especially up in here. Be careful if you shot it with an arrow. Did you find the broadhead? If that broadhead stuck in there, you don't want to reach your hand in there, because if it kills a deer, it should sure slice your hand up. Same with bone fragments or possibly bullet fragments. So be careful when you go up into that chest cavity. That speeds it up. You can do it this way. If that's on the ground, you can do it up by hanging it from a tree, either hanging it by the head or hanging it by the hind legs. Makes it a little less messy this way. And then skinning. If it's a deer you're going to have mounted, make sure you know how to do this without ruining it, because it's going to cost you more to have it mounted if you make cuts that he or she's got to sew up. So just take your time. You're going to just cut the skin. And again, we'll show more on this. There's a lot of YouTube videos that show how to do this. Try to use your knife upward. It cuts less of the hair follicles, gets less hair on the meat as you go. So you're just going to make a cut around, whether you got it from the head or neck or from the legs. And then you're just going to start peeling that skin off, using your knife to separate the skin from the muscle, the tissue that's holding it on there. We can't get in a lot of detail with this on this session, but there's a lot of education out there that you can learn how to do this. I do recommend, don't worry about the videos that say I can do this in 3.5 minutes. You're not there to break a record. You're there to do it without cutting your hands and getting that skin off. Some people have gone now with this gutless method. My recommendation, if it's something you can do quickly, because you do want to cool this deer down quickly. So some people are doing this where they skin it and then they debone it on the carcass without taking the guts out. So this is a way to do it. Again, you can go online and look this up and see how you do this. Again, only if you can get it there quickly to get that meat out of there and get it on ice or get it in the cooler quickly. So butchering is really, there's a group of muscles that you're going to separate out of the hind legs and the shoulder. You got your back strap here and your tenderloins and different neck muscle. So you're going to remove all that. And so, you know, again, there's a lot of videos that tell how you do that. And then those you're going to cut into roasts or steaks, however you like the meat. Most of the rest, the scraps and everything, you can grind up. You can make sausage, you can make hamburgers, a lot of good uses, a lot of different uses for that. And then you'll package it up, you know, regular freezer paper, which they've had for years. We now use a vacuum sealer. It'll stay in the freezer longer. Just remember, cooking venison is extremely lean. There's no marbling in it. So overcooking it makes it tough. Usually if you hear somebody say, oh, I hate venison, it's always tough. It's usually because it's overcooked, dried out, and it becomes like almost like shoe leather. So, you just learn to cook it and don't overcook it. All right, well, that was, I think we made it a little bit late. So again, these are the programs that we're all involved in with James and his GSOs and the Hunter Education Mentoring and the Opportunity Outdoors. You'll get all these slides, and you'll get all these links to join.
Hey, yes, folks. Sorry we ran a little bit long tonight, but hopefully there was more value rather than annoyance for you. And believe me, even when I'm working on workshops, we try to throw a lot of stuff out there. We want to try to give you as much as we can. We're passionate about doing that. And so, yeah, I hope you still enjoyed it, and lots of good stuff. Guy always does a great job with that. As he alluded to, I will be providing the recording video as soon as I get it. I'm thinking probably in a week or less than a week. You'll get a survey within that too, and I'll be asking you to please complete that. You will get the New Hill slides that you saw initially on all the great programming they have. And I'll also be sending the list of remaining webinars and GSO workshops. And we do hope that you join us on Thursday night. So the time for Q&A, we'll take some quick questions. I didn't see a whole lot of questions in there. I see one now. I'll pull it up in a second. And since we typically have an officer here, I request them to give the most common deer hunting violations. And really, there's primarily one, and that is that people don't tag it. As Guy indicated there, before you move that animal, make sure either that paper tag, the month, day, is indicated on there, and it's not a physical tag. You leave it on the paper, or the Go app, which likely a lot of people are going to use. And personally, when it comes to the tagging, I'm still old school. I'll use the paper. I'll stay with the paper, but most people like apps. It's an easy way to do it. And when you're coming out of the woods, don't, like, if you didn't tag it, you don't have the paper tags and you didn't do it on your phone, don't say the battery's dead on the phone, or I can't do it, I have no internet service, because as Guy's pointed out, regardless of internet service, you can still do it, and you don't want to get a ticket. So we want to remain honest. So pulling up some questions, and I'm going to pull this up right now. When field dressing a deer, and it is where I usually narrate, and of course, Guy and/or I can take advantage of that, but we'll let Guy go first. When field dressing a deer on public game land, what is the proper way to dispose of intestines, entrails? Am I allowed to bury it? Guy, quick answer there.
Yeah, you can. As far as I know, you can bury it. They with the chronic wasting disease, especially, they do prefer that as much of the deer stays where the deer was, so that you're not traveling, carrying that potential disease someplace else. So. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd be discreet. I wouldn't do it out in the parking lot. You'd want to do it back in there where it's going to be out of sight of other people as much as you can. And a lot of questions I get, I'll just add to that, is typically with the entrails, I'll just leave them lay right where they are without attempting to try to bury, simply because the animals, usually by the next day, the other animals already have it consumed. And since you're leaving it where you shot it, that is perfectly fine. Yep. If obviously you can bury, an animal, or especially a carcass, do so. I don't think it's a good idea to be leaving carcasses, especially on game lands. I hear some people way back in on some of the bigger tracks, especially in the mountains, they will do that. But the problem is, if we start doing it in areas where people can see it, it's going to be considered littering. So if you're on private and you have the opportunity to bury it, great. If you're on public, get it out there. And I'll just share right off the bat that I live in a development, and so I butcher my deer in the house. Of course, I leave the guts in the woods, and I will double lawn leaf litter bag it and put it in my big green can, and that will go into a lined landfill. Yeah. So I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, and most of the time burying it out there, unless you got a backhoe or something, you're not going to bury it deep enough where something's not going to dig it up anyway. So. Exactly. Is it worth to go out and collect the berries, nuts, etc.? If not, would that be a far better bait to purchase than corn? Well, first, let me talk to the legality, and then Guy can add to that.
If you're hunting private property, it is legal to bait, except if you're in those, it is currently legal to bait, except in those primary and secondary surveillance areas. During the hunting season, you can bait on private, but not during the closed hunting season. But on public land, you cannot bait. So don't put any type of corn or anything out there. And Guy, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, people do collect acorns. You know, I've heard of people collecting acorns, especially if you have a tree in your yard that's dropping lots and lots of acorns and can take it out and use that in lieu of corn or something. So, I mean, it is feasible if you can gather enough. Again, like I said, not on game lands. And, you know, like Deet said, now if you're in one of those surveillance zones, you can only bait during the hunting season.
And
Yeah.
I would add that corn is not an ideal
Yeah.
food for deer. So while it is commonly used for hunting in North Carolina, it's used as an attractant. It is not a high quality food.
Yeah.
So do be careful about overusing that.
I'll just add one thing there in that this is the time of the year we're getting in. September is a great time to go out. When Guy was talking about natural foods, it's a great time to go acorn scouting. So if you
Right.
go in, plan to go in the area that you're hunting, take a pair of binoculars prior to the season and start looking for the nuts, because once they start falling, that's where the deer are going to be.
Mhm.
So that'd be a good thing to do. I
Yeah,
seem to
so-
recall. Okay.
They'll target acorns and they'll leave that corn alone a lot of times and go if their acorns are dropping. So, but hunting an oak tree without acorns is not of a lot of value. So like Dee said, you know that there's going to be acorns. If you're going to put up a stand near some oaks, know that there's going to be acorns dropping.
Yeah, and I seem to recall from Hunter Ed course that it's legal to dispatch a wounded deer with a 22 during non-rifle seasons. I usually don't like to take these legality questions, but to the best of my knowledge, yes, I believe that is, but I would refer to the Regs Digest, and that's also a situation like, yeah, during the archery season to dispatch. I've heard people do it at night, but I would, yes, that's check in the Regs Digest, because that's typically something I do not do. But I believe that is in there. Guy, have you read that?
I think it says a 22 rimfire
Yeah.
pistol, a pistol, not a rifle that can be used. But again, talk to an enforcement officer or read the regulations real well.
Yeah, and that is in the Regs Digest under manner of take. I just haven't seen it for a while.
Right.
How does rain affect deer activity,
Well, I mean, you know, deer, a heavy hurricane type rain with a lot of wind, you know, they generally tend to bed down because it's blocking all their senses. You know, a lot of movement with the wind, a lot of rain making noise, but a light drizzle is absolutely perfect for hunting. I used to hunt in any kind of a lighter rain. Doesn't seem to impact deer movement whatsoever.
And I will say definitely after a big storm, they'll get back on their feet again. So a lot of times, you know, you'll stand down on a rainy day. But I'll never forget one time I was up in my home state, obviously Pennsylvania. I spent some time up there hunting. I remember it was a real stormy day. I slept in and I got really antsy that I was in the house, and I got out. Well, it wasn't 45 minutes later, I had a deer come into me. He was up on the move. And
Yeah.
that was just it. So
And a lot of hunters won't hunt in that kind of weather. So, you know, you can be, you know, have less competition out there for yourself.
Absolutely. How do you determine a property is eligible for public hunting? Oh, well, I'm thinking you're thinking in terms of the agency getting it right. Well, typically what happens is when land definitely connects to existing tracks, that's a very positive thing. If it's a very small track, or even if a large track and there's no access, that's an issue. And one of the challenges I know, just in kind of discussing with our lands acquisition people, and they typically try, and hopefully if I'm right on your question here, typically we learn about tracks to add to the public land program, but there's times when, you know, there is a bidding process, and oftentimes a developer can pay far more than the agency can. And because there's a bidding there's a process. It usually takes some time in state government to acquire it. So again, nearness to existing lands and especially attachment to existing lands to make that tract bigger. And it has to have public access in some way, whether it's via an agreement with a landowner or whatever. So that's the best thing I know about it. And hopefully that answered your question. What power optic is best for hunting in wooded areas or areas where the range might be 100 feet or less, Guy?
100 feet?
That's what they're saying, 100 feet or less. That's really close range.
That's 30 some yards.
Wouldn't you?
Well, you know, that's where the variable, if you're talking about a rifle.
Yep,
you know,
low power.
you know, you've got the variable options, you know, and you can get some that are 2 power to 7 power. 3 to 9 is very, very common, but some of those shorter range with the lower power, you know, you can bring it down to the 2 or 3 power. And generally, I mean, even at 30 yards, I think you could make that shot. But I do highly recommend, if you have a variable scope, always start with it on the lowest power, because if a deer comes real close, you're set. But if it comes real far, you can adjust it to a higher power if you want. But if it's real close, you don't want to do that extra movement to adjust your scope. But my guess is, I mean, I don't even know if they used to make fixed 4 power. I think you can still get those, but the low magnification variables, 2 to 7 or 3 to 9, should be on the lower magnification, should allow you to shoot at those shorter ranges.
Yes, and
And
this part,
Again, and light gathering, that's another aspect of scopes. It gathers light. So if you're in heavy cover, you know, the more light gathering you can, the better. So the good optics help with all of that.
yeah, and this person did say 100 yards. They corrected it. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
variables. That's the answer. Like he said, 2 to 7, 3 to 9. That way, then you're not having the too much deer in the scope and can't even find where the chest
Exactly.
cavity is. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely what you want to do. Okay, with game land, you are allowed to park off the road. Is it closer to the orange rings around trees showing the game land boundary? Yeah, that's typically where it is. Game lands are marked sometimes by a little diamond and the orange rings if they're existing. But I've already been on some of our game lands that haven't been marked for some time. So what I will add with that is twofold. One, when it comes to parking off the road, it should be a spot where you can pull off safely and not damage any property that's within that berm that you know may belong to somebody else. So for example, if there's a parking area, that's a preferred area. But yeah, there may be some safe places to pull off. The other thing I strongly agree with is, and that we didn't talk about it tonight, but it typically does come up, is when you're doing your scouting, the apps now between onX Hunt or that app Avenza, where you can download the georeference PDFs, and then you can tell where the actual boundary is, because even I myself have ran into places in the woods where I knew where the game land boundary was with my app, but it wasn't marked. So you always want to make sure that's the case. So yeah, just make sure it's a safe pull off. You're not digging any ditches up or getting stuck for the worst case. My hunting property is a 16-acre tract completely surrounded by development. What are some things I can do to encourage deer to use our property with so much pressure close by? Well, Guy, that's
Yeah, well,
well, you're currently allowed to bait, so the other
Yeah.
people are baiting, right?
yeah, well, if it's surrounded by development,
Yeah, and that you got to make sure that you're legally allowed to hunt there.
yeah, so yeah, sounds like a great archery area, but you know, it may, if it is legal with firearms, I mean, you're fine. I would definitely use elevated stands for firearms, but what you're going to do is anything that was going to make your property better than what's around.
Mhm.
So, and of course, that's mainly going to be a food source. So if you don't have the opportunity to plant, say, food plots, then the baiting is probably the most would be the most next popular thing. Food plots are are always good because they're not included in this CWD restrictions. You can still have food plots even though you can't bait during the off season. So you can plant things that make your habitat. You can read up all what you can do to your habitat to make it more deer friendly. You need some good cover. If you have a bunch of mature trees and mature trees only, be great to log some of that or get it so you got some early succession, some early plant growth in there, because the majority of their diet during the spring and summer are weeds, forbs. And so if you can make that attractive, you can plant plums and persimmon, things like that on the property. Grapes, those are all things that really attract deer. Again, oak trees, encourage the oak trees. So there's so much you can do on a piece of property to make it fun, make some openings. It just depends on the type, what the habitat is like on that property. 16 acres is plenty. We killed quite a few deer off our property where we lived, and we only had 5 acres. And we had 2 stands, and we had food plots in there, and the deer come in. So it was, and that's what to me is a lot of fun, is making your property the way a deer wants it. And so that's the time to really enjoy it. If you own that property, it's a great thing to have.
Okay, let me just add 2 more things piggybacking on what Guy said. One, if you've not hunted this before, again, make sure that you can legally hunt it. So for example, talk to the local municipality and/or sheriff's office that you can discharge firearms there, because just based on this question, we don't really know, especially if you're in city limits. And 2, we have technical guidance biologists that if you want to improve that property's habitat for wildlife, you just send me an email, walter.james@ncwildlife.org, and I'll send you a district biologist / wildlife conservation technician map, and you call the person within your district. That's what they do, help landowners improve their property for wildlife. But again, make sure that you can legally hunt there. And we'll end that one. Okay, can you both comment on stalking versus stand hunting? Stalking wasn't really discussed specifically yet. Well, let me just add, and I'll let Guy talk to the stack. Stalking deer isn't common in the eastern United States. Stalking is something that typically happens out west with elk or these species that roam far distances. And I would say, and again, going to throw it over to Guy, but more often than not, you're going to try to sneak up on a whitetail in the east, especially with whitetails that are hunted. You've got to be really good and really slow. And the other concern is other hunters, that you're kind of creeping through the woods, and a safety factor. Guy, go ahead.
No, I agree. And because depending on what you're hunting with, if you're shooting a center fire rifle, you don't have a backstop there. So you got to know what's beyond that deer if you were to get one. But I would say that, if you could stalk a deer in these kind of areas, it's a real art, and it takes a lot of practice, a lot of slow. You got to be quiet. You get in the fall when you got crunchy leaves, it's really hard to do. But so that and I talked to a friend of mine who was from the mountains of Virginia, and that was very common to hunt on the ground there. But that's because they had elevation. They had the mountains and hills, so they would hunt up high and look down low. But you don't see it much. It would be an art to be able to do it effectively, but it's just up to the individual whether that's a method of hunting they want to pursue or not.
Okay, for saddle hunting, are hunters allowed to use cleats or blades to climb trees like an arborist? Well, if it comes to public land, you cannot do any damage to the tree. So if you're going to do a saddle on public land, I would suggest those winch strap-on type climbing aids that you can stand on that don't mess up the bark or dig into the tree at all. Anything you want to add for that, Guy? Now, if you're on private property, then yeah, whatever the landowner allows you to do.
If the landowner allows it, but yeah, I agree.
I've only been in the East for a year or so, so I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. Well, and again, it's possible, but there is that concern too for stalking on flat Eastern land with a center fire rifle, all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, and do realize there are, know the regulations, because There's
Yep.
several counties, you have to be 8 foot or more or different
Yes.
distance up
Yep.
in, if you're using a center fire rifle. So there's some counties you cannot be on the ground with a rifle, no matter what. So,
Yep.
and I know Wake County's one, I think Nash County, and there's a couple
Yep.
others. So read your regulations or what county, the back of the regulations, there's a thing on individual counties and their specific regulations. So you got to read those to know what county you're on if you want to be on the ground.
And just giving you a little hint, folks, though I normally share in GSO as well, the Getting Started Outdoors Workshop, is there's really 3 regulation types you want to focus on. That's in the Regulations Digest, and you can obviously get one online. You can read it online, or you can get one from an issuing agent, and a lot of those are being distributed now. You want to look at the season regulations themselves, and are different for the coastal, the Piedmont, and the mountains. And then if you are going to hunt game lands, in addition to those season, game lands will be a little bit more restrictive, and that's in there. And then you also want to look at local laws, which includes that elevation on a stand. So again, let your fingers do the walking first. And when I say like a hand regulations digest, you get one in your hand, you got to go to the restroom, take it in there, because that's a good opportunity to sit and read it. And you got plenty of time. Well, obviously archery's coming in soon, but you got plenty of time before the rut kicks in to review that. For ground hunting with a shotgun, for ground hunting with a shotgun for still hunting is okay. For still hunting, that is still hunting. Well, just to clarify a little bit, yeah, you can use a shotgun to hunt deer. It's still good to be elevated when hunting deer, especially with any type of center fire as compared to archery. And even in archery, our properties can be kind of thick. You could have somebody behind a thicket, but there's 2 different kinds of still hunting. There's still hunting that again has been used. It's often referred to out west, or even in some of the northern states, I've heard them say it, where you're not really totally still. Still hunting is stand hunting. That's what I call still hunting. But for others, it's like where you're moving a very short distance and stopping and looking and scanning, moving a very short distance and stopping and looking and scanning. So if you're a person that don't like to sit still or stand hunt, then yeah, you can do that, but you just need to do so with caution, even with a shotgun, in case someone that you can't see is out ahead of you. Again, when you're elevated, you're always shooting down. You want to add anything to that, Guy?
No.
Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. We are at the, let's see, almost 8:40 mark. So we'll give it about 30 seconds or so. If we don't get any more, we will end for tonight. And again, do come back to us for processing. And I will be sharing again when the recording of the video is ready. I'll be sharing a bunch of other stuff with you folks. And we do thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule tonight. Okay, it looks like we have one more popped up. Oh, thank you both very much. Great job. Well, thank you for being here tonight and taking time out of your schedule. So with that, Guy and Judy, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And we look forward to doing it again on Thursday night. I'm going to bid you all folks a good night. And if we don't see you soon, good luck, be safe, be ethical, and enjoy the great outdoors. Thank you very much.